Welcome back to the rebirth of Toasty tutorials. I had taken a break for a while from playing Hearthstone, but one deck brought me back because I think it's just a really fun reincarnation of a previously popular deck. Today I'm going to be talking about Tempo Mage. So first let's answer the question of what is Tempo Mage in the first place? Tempo Mage is an aggressive deck that tries to put your opponents so far behind in the game that they cannot come back from the board position and low life total that they're at. The deck can also play an alternative game plan of stalling for a bit, drawing a ton of extra cards, and then using direct damage burn spells to finish off the opponent. So you might ask, what's new with this deck? So the deck receives several exciting new tools in the Kobolds and Catacombs expansion, which as of this video is the newest expansion. My favorite new card, by far, and probably my favorite card in the game, is Alaneth, which is the Mage legendary weapon. So this allows you at the end of your turn to draw 3 extra cards every single turn until you run out of cards in your deck, basically, and will start fatiguing. And drawing extra cards in card games is always very, very strong, especially in a deck like this where you have a lot of cheap spells that you'll actually have time to play, as well as when you have direct damage that will accumulate and allow you to win the game regardless of what your opponent's doing. This card does have the downside that I alluded to earlier, that every turn the rest of the game you will be drawing 3 cards, so once you're out of cards in your deck you will start immediately fatiguing very severely, but the deck is configured to very much minimize this disadvantage. An alternative name for this deck is Secret Mage, so let's talk about the secrets in the deck. This deck plays a strong package of 3 different secrets with 5 copies of those secrets to keep your opponents guessing. Counterspell is essential in the current metagame to protect your minions against board wipes, prevent pesky life gain from your opponents, as well as to prevent spells like Nourish and Ultimate Infestation resolving from the Druid opponents. Explosive Runes is great for early and mid-game removal and can also kill things like Jade Behemoths in a pinch. Spellbender is a newer addition to the deck and is great for protecting your powerful minions from direct damage spells, and it's also great in that it keeps your opponent guessing, as you then have a third option whenever you play a secret rather than only having 2. Since over time people will definitely figure out that all these Secret Mage decks are playing Counterspell, Explosive Runes, and nothing else. So we've discussed that the deck has some sweet new toys and some cool mysterious secrets, so let's talk about the minions next. The first card is possibly the most powerful card in the entire Mage arsenal, the mighty Mana Worm. This card is definitely undercosted, plain and simple. It's a very aggressive card that basically always creates favorable trades, and even in the late game when combined with a spell or 2, it does work. This card is the key to many of your best draws, and definitely gives the deck a leg up on the competition. Golakka Crawler is a direct response to the prevalence and power level of Patches the Pirate, as well as the rest of the pirates. Tempo Mage is traditionally a little bit susceptible to opposing hyper-aggressive decks, so this will shore up that problem just a bit. Sorcerer's Apprentice is a strong minion that synergizes with many of the cards in the deck, and it isn't actually at its best in this deck, I would say, but it is the best option we have available to us currently, and it also does some pretty nasty things with a few other cards in the deck. Next up, we have perhaps the most unusual card in this deck, Cabal Lackey. Normally 2/1s are very bad at Hearthstone because they die to several hero powers including Mage, Druid, Paladin, Rogue, and sometimes Shaman if they make the 1/1 totem. In this deck, however, the Lackey is awesome. Having a 2/1 that can potentially trade with 2 drops, as well as getting a secret down immediately on turn 1, and having your opponent guessing, is a very powerful strategy to be doing. Arcanologist is a nicely statted 2/3 for 2, and he always ensures that you have at least 1 secret. It's frequently not the most exciting card to keep in an opening hand, but it always provides a great stability to a draw and ensures that you have both a 2 and 3 drop, which is the most important thing to be doing in a tempo deck like this, because in tempo decks you just want to make sure you're curving out, preferably hitting 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 drops, and if your opponent stumbles at all, that means you will take over the game, take over the board, and you can spiral that into a victory very frequently. You also have Kirin Tormage in this deck, which is also a semi-unusual card, but is very powerful. This is Cabal Lackey's older sibling. Again, it's very powerful in this deck. A 4/3 body is basically always going to find a trade, and it's usually going to be a great trade for you. And if it's not trading, then 4 damage is definitely a nice chunk to hit your opponent for. The fact that it also puts a secret into play for what is normally the retail cost of a secret is just ridiculous. This card is very, very good in this deck. The final minions in this deck are your payoff and your big reward for playing all the secrets that you're playing and going through the effort. Medivh's Valet is an extremely powerful card that's fine as a 2/3 in a pinch. Again, that's a very good size for a minion, especially for 2 mana. But it can also be used to take decisive control of the board in the early to mid game, if you have a Cabal Lackey, for example, on turn 1. And it could also be a nice finishing source of 3 damage late game when you combine it with some of the other awesome spells in the deck. Cabal Crystal Runner lets you do disgusting things like playing 2 mana 5/5s on turn 4 or 5 and just giving you tremendous board presence. It's very easy for this deck to have a turn where it plays an undercosted Corridor Creeper and a Cabal Crystal Runner, and your opponent's just hopelessly behind for the rest of the game. Sometimes they might be praying for an expensive board clear, such as a Twisting Nether, but then you also have answers such as Counterspell, or after they play Twisting Nether, you just burn them out with some of your direct damage spells. Speaking of burn spells, let's take a look at the direct damage burn spells in this deck. Frostbolt's a cheap and very flexible card. Generally, you just want to use it in the late game as a finisher, but there's certainly no shame in killing a particularly threatening minion with it. Fireball, even more so, tends to be a finisher, especially if you're drawing extra cards with Alaneth, but its 6 damage also means that it kills 99% of the things that you need to kill. So again, it's a very flexible tool, and you'll always be happy it's in your deck. Fireland's Portal is the opposite of the previous 2 spells, and that very frequently you will want to use it to kill an opposing minion, and then take control of the board with the 5-drop that the portal generates for you. This card feels very good with Sorcerer's Apprentice, and most of the 5-drops in Hearthstone right now are very solid, so this will rarely find a garbage poor minion for you. To round out the deck, we have our 2 miscellaneous spells. Primordial Glyph is a very powerful card that can be very flexible, but can also brick on occasion. And it's also very silly with Sorcerer's Apprentice, since the casting of the glyph gets reduced by 1 with a Sorcerer's Apprentice, and then when you play the actual spell you discovered, it's reduced not only by the 2 on the glyph, but 1 as well on the Sorcerer's Apprentice. So some cool things you can do with this, or at least my favorite thing, is that you can find a Simulacrum, which duplicates the cheapest minion in your hand. And these tend to be undercosted 5/5s in this deck. So you're definitely getting some very good discounts on your cards. Next up, we have Arcane Intellect, which is just a mage standby. It's kind of a card when you don't have anything else and don't really hit your curve the way you want to, that it tends to patch up and fix your curve a bit. It's probably the weakest card in this deck, which is funny because several other mage decks very much rely on it, but it makes the cut in most or all builds of this deck currently. That concludes my look at the current quote-unquote net deck version of Temple Mage. And I think the build I've shown here is very well tuned to fight the current metagame, but there are a few nifty tools that you can experiment with if you want to go a little bit rogue. The most ambitious of these tools is Vaporize. It's either like a 10 out of 10 card or a 1 out of 10 card, and that's either going to be the greatest thing ever for you or absolutely terrible. And unfortunately, I'd say it's probably closer to 1 out of 10 right now, especially with decks such as Aggressive Paladins becoming more popular. If the metagame shifts back to more mid-range and control decks, however, that don't have cheap minions, then this is definitely one to keep an eye on. Mirror Entity is in a similar boat to Vaporize, but not quite as punishing when it's not at its best. Mirror Entity is traditionally the most played mage secret, along with Ice Block and Ice Armor, so it's very interesting to see it's not making the cut into the standard Temple Mage build of today. Finally, Ethereal Arcanist is an option if you want a little more board presence. I'm actually very surprised I haven't seen this played, and I think it's definitely the best of these 3 options right now. The issues are that it's bad with Alaneth, since it's relatively expensive at 4 mana and doesn't just deal direct damage. And it also requires you to already be in decent position with a secret on board. However, if you do have a secret, then it's a 4 mana 5/5 that rapidly snowballs out of control, and therefore I am very interested in testing this card and seeing how it performs. In conclusion, Temple Mage is a very powerful deck currently, and it does many of the things that I look for when selecting a deck. It has very aggressive starts, particularly with Mana Worms. It has several 2-card combos within the deck, and all the cards work very synergistically together. It can win in the early to mid game by snowballing a board that your opponent can't possibly catch up against, and it can also win late game by drawing its entire deck with Alaneth and burning out the opponent with direct damage spells. It also has some fun cards again like Alaneth. It gets to play Counterspell, which is unusual. You get to play Fireland's Portal and get very lucky or unlucky with making random 5-mana minions. And you also get to play Medivh's Valet, who nicely informs people saying, "Excuse me, you are on fire." So definitely try out this deck and let me know how it goes. Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching my video. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe as it really helps me out. Thanks.